The fork scraped across the aluminum tray, lifting a strip of gray chicken from sauce that had already formed a skin. My mother pushed the tray closer to me with 2 fingers. "Scraps are good enough for you," she said. Across the table, my younger sister Haley raised her champagne glass and smiled. "Pathetic," she said. As always, the wedding band continued playing behind us. Guests laughed beneath chandeliers wrapped in white roses. A waiter passed carrying plates of herb-crusted salmon toward the tables beside ours, while the cold metal beneath my fingertips pulled the warmth from my skin. I did not touch the food. I looked past the tray and saw Haley's phone propped against the vase beside her chair. The camera faced the empty space directly in front of me. She was recording. Before I tell you what happened next, I hope you are doing well wherever you are listening from. Stay with me, because that cold tray exposed far more than my family expected, and please subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what came after. 14 months have passed since my sister's wedding, but I can still remember the way everyone at that table stopped chewing. They were waiting for me to react. My mother had spent most of my life telling people I was cold, difficult, and jealous of Haley. If I defended myself, she called me dramatic. If I walked away, she said I believed I was better than everyone else. Haley had learned early that she could provoke me and then point to my response as proof that I was the problem. That evening, they wanted an audience. More importantly, they wanted a recording. I rested both hands in my lap and looked directly at my mother. "Where did this tray come from?" Susan Grant blinked as though the question had disappointed her. "It was left over from the staff meal," she said. "You arrived late, Claire. You should be grateful there was anything available." I had not arrived late. The invitation said the reception began at 6. I had entered the glass conservatory at 5:45, congratulated Haley and Lucas, signed the guest book, and taken the seat listed on the printed chart. There had simply been no meal assigned to me. Every other guest at the family table had a china plate, polished silverware, and a folded linen napkin. I had been given a disposable tray that looked as though it had been sitting beside a warming cabinet for an hour. Haley tilted her head toward the phone. "Go ahead," she said. "Say what you really think." That was when I became certain. The phone had not been placed there to capture a sentimental family moment. Haley wanted footage of me shouting at our mother during her wedding reception. She wanted me angry, humiliated, and loud enough for every person nearby to turn around. I looked at the tiny red light reflected in the black glass of the screen. Then I looked back at her. "I think I'm leaving." Her smile tightened. "That's it? What were you expecting?" I wasn't expecting anything. She took a sip of champagne. "Not everything is about you." My mother laughed softly. "Claire has always needed to make an entrance or an exit. She can never simply sit with the family." I reached for my clutch beneath the chair. I had not come to Haley's wedding to repair our relationship. I had stopped believing one pleasant evening could undo years of favoritism and quiet cruelty. I had come because she was my sister, because I had received an invitation, and because I wanted to know I had behaved with dignity even if they did not. I had paid for my own hotel room. I had rented my own car. I had refused Susan's repeated suggestions that I cover the flowers, the photographer, or the honeymoon. I had given them one evening. They had used less than an hour of it. As I stood, a man approached from behind Haley's chair. He was still wearing his suit jacket, but his tie had loosened, and the white rose pinned to his lapel leaned slightly to one side. Lucas Reed had been married to my sister for less than 3 hours. He looked at the tray, then at me. His expression changed so quickly that Haley lowered her glass. "Claire?" I turned toward him. Lucas and I had met in person once, during his onboarding at second table. We had also spoken through several video conferences after he accepted the position of Regional Operations Director. He was competent, prepared, and still knew enough to take notes during every conversation. Until that moment, I had no idea he was Haley's fiancé. My sister had told me she was marrying a regional logistics manager named Luke. She had never mentioned the company. She had also told Lucas that her estranged older sister lived in another state, used a different last name, and would not attend the wedding. He stared at me as if 2 separate rooms in his life had just collapsed into one. "Boss?" he said. "You're her sister?" Haley's face lost its color. A few guests at the next table turned toward us. Lucas looked from the china plates to the disposable tray in front of my chair. You gave my boss scraps? Lucas, lower your voice, Haley said. I'm asking what happened. Nothing happened. Claire arrived after dinner service, and Mom found something for her. I did not arrive late, I said. My mother stood and pressed one hand against the table. This is exactly what Claire does. She hides important things, and then waits for the moment when revealing them will embarrass everyone. I almost laughed at the accusation. Haley had hidden my identity from Lucas. She had separated me into two fictional women. The bitter sister she described at home, and the executive he reported to at work. Yet Susan had already found a way to call that my deception. I didn't know where Lucas worked, I said. Haley never told me. She shouldn't have to submit her husband's resume for your approval, Susan snapped. I didn't say she should. Lucas looked at Haley. You told me your sister was a freelance writer named Erin. Haley's eyes flicked toward the phone. It was still recording. Can we discuss this somewhere private? She reached for the device. As her hand passed over the vase, the tablecloth shifted. The cold tray slid toward the edge. I caught it before it fell. My thumb pressed against the underside, and a rectangle of paper scraped across my skin. I turned the tray over. A blue adhesive label had been stuck beneath the aluminum base. Most guests would have seen a meaningless line of letters and numbers. I saw a regional distribution code, a preparation date, and the abbreviated name of one of Second Table's partner facilities, NRCP, North River Community Pantry. My irritation disappeared. The music continued. Someone on the dance floor cheered as the bride's relatives gathered for a photograph. Haley and Susan were still arguing with Lucas, but their voices seemed farther away. I studied the label again. The tray had been packaged that morning through one of our food recovery programs. It was not a staff meal prepared by the venue. It had entered the Second Table distribution system and should have been delivered to a community pantry across town. I placed the tray flat on the table and took out my phone. Haley stepped closer. What are you doing? Documenting the label. It's a food container, Claire. Yes. I took a photograph showing the tray, the table number, and the place setting around it. Then I photographed the code in close detail and captured the time displayed on my screen. My mother reached toward the tray. I moved it beyond her hand. Do not touch it. The sharpness in my voice silenced the table. Haley gave a nervous laugh. You are turning leftovers into evidence now? I don't know what they are yet. Lucas leaned over the label. His brow tightened. That is one of ours. Yes. He straightened and looked toward the service doors. I can call the warehouse. No. I slipped my phone back into my clutch. Do not contact anyone connected to the shipment. Do not delete any messages, emails, or files related to this wedding. Do not forward them to me. He looked confused. Why not? Because you are my employee, my sister is involved, and I have a conflict of interest. For the first time that evening, Haley looked frightened rather than embarrassed. Susan folded her arms. This is absurd. You are threatening your sister over a tray of cold chicken. I haven't threatened anyone. You are using your position to destroy her wedding. I am leaving her wedding. I turned toward the woman standing near the service entrance. Her name tag identified her as Elise Morgan, the venue manager. I asked her to witness where the tray had been found and arrange for it to be placed in a clean food storage bag without removing the label. I also asked her to preserve the catering records and surveillance footage from that evening. Elise hesitated, then nodded. Haley stepped between us. You cannot order my venue staff around. I'm not ordering her. I'm making a preservation request because an item carrying my organization's distribution code appeared at your reception. The guests nearest us were no longer pretending not to listen. Haley's phone remained beside the vase, recording every word. Lucas looked at her. Why is Second Table food here? I don't know, she said. Her answer came too quickly. Susan answered at the same time. The caterer must have brought it. The two women looked at each other. That small contradiction told me more than either of them intended. I walked out through the conservatory doors without waiting for dessert, speeches, or the first dance. The night air smelled of wet. Behind me, the music became muffled when the doors closed. From the parking lot, I called Marisol Vega, the chair of Second Table's board. I told her exactly what had happened. I did not leave out the fact that the bride was my sister or that my mother had once volunteered for the organization. I sent the photographs, and asked her to restrict my access to the relevant operational records until independent counsel could review the matter. Marisol was silent for several seconds. "Are you certain about the code?" "I'm certain about what it appears to be. I am not certain how it reached the wedding. Do not investigate it yourself." "I won't." She arranged an emergency call with compliance and asked me to perform only one limited task before my access was suspended: confirm the destination attached to the code. I opened the distribution dashboard from the driver's seat of my rental car. The label belonged to a shipment prepared that morning. According to our records, the food had been delivered before noon. Its destination was North River Community Pantry. Its status read complete. I stared at the cold tray through the photograph on my screen and understood that my mother had not merely tried to humiliate me with leftovers. According to our system, that food had already been handed to families across town, but it had been sitting cold in front of me at my sister's wedding. Marisol called me back 12 minutes after I left the wedding venue. By then, I had parked beneath the covered entrance of my hotel, but I had not gone inside. Rain tapped against the windshield, while the blue label from the tray filled my phone screen. "Independent counsel is joining us," Marisol said. "From this moment forward, you do not contact the pantry, the warehouse, the caterer, or anyone connected to the shipment." "I understand. You also need to stop accessing the operational system." "I only open the destination record you authorized." "I know. I am not accusing you of anything, Claire. I am protecting the investigation and protecting you." That distinction mattered, even though it did not make the order easier to accept. Second Table had begun 15 years earlier with one rented van, 3 grocery stores, and a church basement that smelled like canned tomatoes and floor wax. I had built every layer of the organization from that beginning. The distribution dashboard, the warehouse procedures, the vendor agreements, and the regional offices all existed because I had helped create them. Now the correct decision was to step away from them. "I'll send a written statement tonight," I said. "Only facts," Marisol replied. "No conclusions about your mother or sister." "I haven't reached any conclusions. That is why I trust you to do this correctly." The call ended just before midnight. I entered my hotel room, removed my shoes, and sat at the small desk beside the window. For the next hour, I documented every relevant detail in chronological order. I recorded when I arrived at the venue, where I sat, what Susan said, where Haley's phone had been positioned, when Lucas approached, how the tray shifted, and where I found the label. I listed the photographs I had taken and the name of the venue manager who had agreed to preserve the tray. I did not write that Haley looked guilty. I did not write that Susan had lied. Those were interpretations. I wrote that Haley said she did not know where the tray came from. I wrote that Susan said the caterer must have brought it. I wrote that both answers were given within seconds of each other. When I finished, I sent the statement to Marisol and copied the independent attorney whose name she had provided. Then I closed my laptop. My phone already contained 6 messages from Susan. The first said I had humiliated Haley in front of her new family. The second said Lucas was furious because I had made him question his wife. The third accused me of using a charity technicality to punish my sister for being happy. The remaining messages became shorter and angrier. "You always do this. You could never let her have one day. Do not call me until you are ready to apologize." I did not respond. Haley had sent only one message: "You got what you wanted." I placed the phone face down on the desk and went to bed without sleeping much. The following morning, the first public version of the story appeared. Haley posted a photograph of herself in her wedding dress with mascara tracks beneath her eyes. The caption did not use my name, but it did not need to. She wrote that someone close to her had arrived, determined to create conflict, used professional power to intimidate her husband, and turned a private family misunderstanding into a threat against her future. Hundreds of comments appeared within an hour. Most offered sympathy. Some called the unnamed relative jealous. Others praised Haley for protecting her peace. I read only enough to understand the direction she had chosen. She was not going to explain why food marked for a community pantry had appeared at her reception. She was going to make the investigation itself look like abuse. At 9 that morning, Marisol introduced me to Dana Price through a secure video call. Dana was an attorney specializing in nonprofit compliance and internal investigations. She had a calm voice, a direct manner, and no visible interest in comforting me. That made her exactly the right person for the job. "Before we discuss the shipment," she said, I need to establish the relationship between everyone involved. She confirmed that Susan was my mother, Haley was my sister, and Lucas reported to me during his regional onboarding period. Then she asked a question I had already considered. Why did you not know Lucas was marrying your sister? Haley called him Luke and said he worked in logistics. I answered. She never identified the company. Lucas joined Second Table 2 months ago. I met him once during onboarding and spoke to him through video meetings. Did you ever discuss his personal life? No. His wedding leave was approved through Human Resources. I didn't review the request personally. Dana turned to Lucas, who had joined the call from a quiet room with a blank wall behind him. He looked as though he had not slept either. What did Haley tell you about her sister? Dana asked. Lucas glanced at me before answering. She said her sister's name was Erin Wallace. She said Erin was a freelance writer who lived in another state and had been estranged from the family for years. My mother had called me Erin when I was born, but my father changed my legal name to Claire before I started school. Wallace had been my married name for less than 3 years in my 20s. Haley had used 2 real details and placed them around a fictional woman. Did she ever show you a photograph? Dana asked. No, she said there were none she wanted to keep. Did you ever mention Claire Bennett to her? Yes, several times. What was her reaction? Lucas rubbed one hand over his jaw. She said the name sounded familiar, but she never said why. Once, she joked that my boss probably had no family because nobody that successful had time for one. Dana made a note. I felt no satisfaction when Lucas said it. His marriage had lasted less than a day before he discovered that the woman beside him had invented an entire person to keep us apart. Dana moved on. Did you authorize Second Table to sponsor your wedding reception? No. Did you sign any letter confirming that the reception was an official fundraising event? No. Did you authorize food to be transferred from a regional warehouse to the venue? No. Have you deleted any messages, emails, photographs, or files since last night? No, Claire told me not to. Dana asked him to preserve his phone, laptop, cloud accounts, onboarding documents, and communications with Haley. She explained that he was not to send those files directly to me. Lucas nodded. I understand. Then Dana addressed me. You will not communicate privately with Mr. Reed about this matter. Any work decisions involving him will be handled by the board or another executive. Agreed. Even if he asks you for help. I understand. She studied me through the screen for a moment, as if testing whether I truly did. I did. Lucas was both my employee and my sister's husband. Even if he had been deceived, my involvement in decisions about his job could compromise the investigation and make every future conclusion look personal. Dana shared a document on the screen. It was a letter printed on Second Table letterhead. The letter described Haley and Lucas's wedding reception as a community fundraising event designed to raise awareness about food insecurity. It thanked participating vendors for donating goods and services and promised that unused food would be distributed through approved community partners. At the bottom was Lucas's signature. He leaned closer to his camera. That looks like mine. Is it yours? Dana asked. I didn't sign this. The signature was unusually clean, as if it had been placed rather than written. Dana opened a second document beside it. It was part of Lucas's onboarding packet. His signature appeared at the bottom of an employee acknowledgement form. The 2 images matched exactly. Not almost exactly. Every curve, hesitation, and angle was identical. A small gap in the final letter appeared in both versions. Someone copied it, Lucas said. That is the working hypothesis, Dana replied. We will confirm it through the original files. She did not declare forgery based on appearance alone. She requested the source document, creation history, email headers, and vendor copies. The process was slower than accusation. It was also stronger. Next, Dana displayed the email address that had sent the sponsorship letter. At first glance, it looked official because it had been sent through a legacy Second Table vendor mailbox that should have been disabled. The sender's name was Community Partnerships, and the signature block contained Second Table's logo, address, and tax information. The mailbox no longer appeared on our active account list, but it could still authenticate through the old vendor portal. Who had access to old vendor materials? Dana asked. Several employees in the early years, I said. We did not have a centralized platform then. Did either member of your family ever assist? I knew where the question was going. My mother volunteered during our first expansion. She helped contact restaurants and local suppliers. She used a vendor portal and a shared email account. When did that end? About 4 years ago. Were her credentials formally revoked? I submitted the request. That was not my question. I held her gaze through the screen. I do not know whether every linked account was disabled. The admission tasted worse than any accusation Susan had sent me. I had trusted an old administrative request to close a door connected to my family. I had never gone back to test the lock. Dana did not soften her voice. We will determine what remained active and who used it. Until then, you should not speculate. I won't. After the call, Marisol asked me to remain online. You did the right thing by disclosing that, she said. I should have verified it years ago. Yes. Her honesty hurt, but I respected it. A failure to confirm account closure is a governance issue, she continued. It is not the same as diverting food or creating false documents. Do not combine those things in your mind. I'm responsible for the weakness. You are responsible for helping us correct it. The person who exploited it is responsible for the exploitation. I wrote that sentence down after the call ended. For most of my life, Susan had taught me to absorb responsibility until nobody else had to carry any. If Haley lied, I should have been more understanding. If she took something, I should have been more generous. If she humiliated me, I should have been mature enough not to react. That pattern could not enter the investigation with me. I could admit my failure without adopting theirs. Late that afternoon, Dana called again. The venue had provided the original sponsorship email with its full headers. Those headers confirmed that it had been sent through the legacy vendor mailbox once assigned to Susan, not through any active second table account. The account had not been dormant. Someone had accessed it repeatedly during the weeks before the wedding. Dana was careful with her words. This does not yet prove who was sitting at the device, she said, but the credentials used were still registered under Susan Grant's name. I looked toward the dark hotel window, where my reflection hovered over the city lights. The cold tray had carried my organization's label. The false sponsorship letter carried Lucas's copied signature. Now the account that sent it carried my mother's name. By the third morning after the wedding, North River Community Pantry had confirmed that the shipment listed as complete had never arrived in full. Dana delivered the news during a secure call with Marisol and me. The pantry received 36 boxes, she said. The warehouse record shows 72. I stared at the number on the screen. Half the shipment was missing. North River served families from 3 neighborhoods where grocery stores had closed or reduced their hours. People did not arrive there because they wanted free food. Many came after working full shifts, caring for elderly parents, or stretching one paycheck across rent, medicine, and utilities. The pantry manager had expected enough food to remain open until 6 that evening. Instead, they had placed a sign on the door shortly after 4. No more boxes today. Several families had already been waiting when the sign went up. I need to call the manager, I said. Dana shook her head. Not yet. I should apologize. You are the founder of the organization under review, and your mother and sister may be involved. Any direct conversation could affect a witness's memory or make it appear that you are shaping the account. I'm not trying to shape anything. I know, that does not change how it could look. I leaned back in my chair and forced myself to accept the answer. My instinct was always to repair the immediate damage. When a delivery failed, I found another truck. When a freezer broke, I located temporary storage. When a donor withdrew, I adjusted the budget before anyone missed a meal. This time, I had to stay away while other people examined a failure inside the system I had built. What can I do? I asked. Provide any policy documents we request. Answer questions honestly. Let the investigation move. It sounded passive, but it was not. Restraint required more discipline than control. Later that morning, Dana received the loading dock footage from our regional warehouse. She did not send the raw recording to me. Instead, she showed selected portions during another board-supervised call. The first truck left shortly after 9 with 36 boxes. Its driver scanned the shipment at North River, and the pantry confirmed receipt. The second half remained on the loading dock for another 40 minutes. Then a white catering van backed into the bay. The logo on its side belonged to the company that had catered Haley's wedding. 2 warehouse workers moved the remaining boxes into the van. One of them checked a printed transfer order before closing the rear doors. "Who authorized the release?" Marisol asked. Dana brought up the electronic record. The request had been submitted through the same old vendor account linked to Susan. It stated that the food was being redirected to an approved fundraising reception, after which unused portions would be delivered to a community partner. The receiving location was Haley's wedding venue. "That explains how the tray reached the reception," I said. "It explains the route," Dana corrected. "It does not yet establish who entered the request or what every person involved understood." She was right to keep separating fact from conclusion. The warehouse workers might have believed the order was legitimate. The caterer might have thought they were collecting food for an official second table event. Even the venue could have accepted the paperwork without knowing it was false. The people who created the paperwork were another matter. Before the call ended, Dana asked whether I recognized the language in the transfer request. I read it twice. The phrasing was familiar, but not because I had written it. It resembled old outreach templates from second table's first years, when Susan still volunteered. The document used expressions we had removed from official materials long ago. It referred to recipients as the less fortunate. Language our communications team had stopped using because it reduced people to their circumstances. Susan had always liked the phrase. She believed charity required a visible difference between the person giving and the person receiving. I told Dana that, then immediately added that my memory was not proof. She noted it without comment. While the investigators followed the shipment, Haley began building a different story online. She posted a short video from the reception. It began with me standing beside the table and ended moments after Lucas recognized me. The clip did not show Susan placing the cold tray in front of me. It did not include Haley calling me pathetic. It did not show the blue label beneath the container. It showed only the part that made me appear powerful. Lucas asked why his wife had served scraps to his boss. I photographed the tray. I asked the venue manager to preserve records. Then I walked out. Haley added text across the video. "When your sister uses her corporate title to hijack your wedding." By lunch, the clip had spread beyond her followers. Strangers accused me of threatening a bride over a meal. Some said I had probably arranged the entire confrontation to humiliate Haley. Others called me the type of boss who expected employees to treat her like royalty outside work. Our communications director, Simone, sent me a proposed response. It was professional and restrained. It explained that Second Table was reviewing an irregularity involving food distribution and that no employment decisions had been made regarding Lucas. I approved the organizational statement. Then Simone asked whether I wanted to issue a personal one. No. Haley's version is gaining attention. An incomplete video is not corrected by another incomplete statement. She is defining you before the facts are public. I know. It was difficult to watch a lie move faster than an investigation. Haley understood that speed favored emotion. A crying bride could reach thousands of people before an auditor verified one document. But if I used Second Table's platform to defend myself, she could claim I had turned a nonprofit into a weapon against my family. I refused to give her that. The organization released only the necessary statement. No names, no accusations, no references to the wedding beyond confirmation that an inquiry was underway. Haley responded by posting that certain people were hiding behind lawyers. I closed the page and returned to the governance documents Dana had requested. That afternoon, the catering company's owner agreed to an interview. Her name was Denise Porter. She had operated Porter events for nearly 20 years and had donated services to legitimate Second Table fundraisers before. According to Denise, Susan contacted her 6 weeks before the wedding. Susan introduced herself as an early Second Table volunteer who still handled special community partnerships. She said Haley and Lucas's reception would double as a fundraising event focused on food insecurity. Denise received the false sponsorship letter bearing Lucas's copied signature. She also received a transfer authorization for the food. Did she speak directly with Haley? Dana asked during the recorded interview. Several times, Denise answered. Haley approved the menu and the social media language. She said the wedding would show people that luxury and generosity could exist together. I closed my eyes briefly. That sentence sounded exactly like my sister. Did anyone tell you that the food had originally been allocated to North River Pantry? Dana continued. No. We were told it was excess inventory approved for event use. Who directed your driver to collect it? Susan. Who decided what would happen to the unused portion after the reception? Denise paused. Haley did. The next part of her account changed the direction of the investigation. Porter Events had not used all the recovered food. Some trays remained sealed in temperature-controlled storage after the reception. Denise said she expected them to be delivered to North River the following morning. Instead, Haley sent new instructions. She told the catering staff that another community partner had agreed to take the food. She provided an address for a discount restaurant on the south side of the city. Did the restaurant sign a donation receipt? Dana asked. No. They gave my driver a purchase invoice. Denise had questioned it, but Haley told her the restaurant was making a contribution in exchange for the food and that Second Table had approved the arrangement. The catering company still had the invoice. Dana obtained it before the end of the day. The document listed multiple sealed food trays, packaged produce, and refrigerated items. The amount was far below normal wholesale value, but it was not a donation. The restaurant had purchased food that had already been donated to Second Table. The payment had not gone to the pantry. It had not gone to the catering company. It had not gone to Second Table. The recipient was a limited liability company called HG Social. I knew the name. Haley had created HG Social to receive influencer payments, brand sponsorships, and appearance fees. She had once asked me to invest in it. I declined after she refused to provide a budget or business plan. Dana enlarged the invoice on the screen. Do you recognize this company? She asked. Yes. Who owns it? My sister. Marisol exhaled slowly. Until that moment, Haley could still have claimed she misunderstood the source of the food. She could have said Susan handled the documents and she trusted her mother. She could have insisted the wedding vendors arranged everything without her knowledge. The invoice made that defense harder. Someone had taken food intended for a pantry, used part of it to support Haley's wedding, then sold the remainder. The money went directly into her business. Dana reminded us that an invoice alone did not prove who arranged the transaction or who ultimately controlled the funds. Bank records and communications would still need to be obtained through the proper process. But the question had changed. We were no longer asking only how a cold tray reached my sister's wedding. We were asking how many people had profited before it reached my table. Dana placed the invoice beside the photograph I had taken at the reception. The blue label matched the shipment record. The loading dock footage showed the route. The caterer explained the collection. The restaurant documented the sale. At the bottom of the invoice, beneath the list of food that should never have been sold, was the payment recipient. HG Social LLC, my sister's company. 3 weeks after Haley's wedding, Dana showed me a preliminary reconstruction built from records voluntarily supplied by the restaurant and wedding vendors, together with a payment confirmation retained in the legacy vendor mailbox. The discount restaurant had transferred $9,400 to HG Social for food it believed Second Table had authorized for resale. Within 48 hours, Haley's photographer and dress boutique each received payments identified as coming from the same company. Another confirmation showed $2,700 sent to an account bearing Susan's name. The transfer description read Community Coordination. The investigators could not yet confirm what happened to the remaining money. That would require private banking records, obtained through the proper legal process. I stared at those 2 words until they stopped looking like language. My mother had not been paid for moving boxes or arranging deliveries. She had been paid for helping turn stolen charity resources into a wedding benefit. Dana kept her voice neutral. We cannot assume the description reflects the actual purpose of the transfer. It is only the label entered by the sender. Haley entered it? The transfer originated from HG Social. We are still waiting for records showing which device authorized it. I nodded. By then, I had learned to separate what seemed obvious from what we could prove. That discipline did not make the evidence less painful. It simply prevented pain from becoming an argument. Dana opened another file. The invoice from the restaurant was not the first transaction tied to HG Social. It was only the first one connected directly to the wedding shipment. Over the previous 18 months, investigators had linked HG Social to at least 3 earlier events promoted as charitable partnerships, although the complete flow of money would not be confirmed until authorities obtained the relevant financial records. The first was her bridal shower. The second was a holiday content event held at a luxury apartment complex. The third was a community brunch, where Haley filmed herself serving meals to invited guests beneath a banner carrying Second Table's logo. I remembered that brunch. Haley had posted a video of herself placing a box of food into the hands of an elderly woman. The camera lingered on Haley's smile, while music played beneath a caption about compassion. At the time, I thought she had volunteered with another organization. I had even sent her a message saying I was glad she had found a cause that mattered to her. She replied with a heart and wrote, "You inspired me." Now Dana showed me the sponsorship documents associated with the event. The letterhead was ours. The tax identification information belonged to Second Table. The language came from an outreach template we had stopped using years earlier. The approval signature belonged to no active employee. The event had received free floral arrangements, discounted catering, donated tableware, and promotional support from local businesses that believed they were assisting Second Table. Only a small portion of the food shown in Haley's video reached a pantry. The rest supported the event itself. Some became background decoration for her photographs. Other items disappeared from the distribution record after being marked complete. Marisol sat beside Dana during the secure meeting, her hands folded over a legal pad. "How many vendors?" she asked. 17 confirmed so far, Dana replied. "There may be more." "And the estimated value?" "We are not ready to issue a final number." Dana glanced toward me before continuing. "The preliminary total, including food, donated services, event sponsorships, and resale proceeds, is approaching $200,000. For several seconds, nobody spoke. $200,000 was not enough to destroy Second Table financially. Our annual operating budget was far larger. But that was not the point. Every dollar had entered the relationship under false pretenses. Every donated hour had been given because someone believed it would feed families, support a pantry, or strengthen a legitimate charity event. Haley and Susan had taken trust, converted it into luxury, and assumed the organization was large enough not to notice. "How did none of our controls catch this?" Marisol asked. The question was directed at Dana, but I answered first. "Because the requests were designed to look small." Dana turned toward me. I continued, "They did not move one massive shipment. They used old templates, familiar vendors, and events that sounded plausible. Each request was below the level that would automatically reach executive review." "That explains the method," Marisol said. "It does not explain the failure." "No," I agreed, "it does not." I had spent years building systems around large risks. We reviewed major grants, warehouse losses, fleet expenses, donor restrictions, and food safety records. We had controls for the events most likely to attract attention. Susan and Haley had exploited the spaces between them. They used old relationships that still felt trustworthy. They requested goods in quantities that looked ordinary. They relied on vendors who remembered Susan from the years when she genuinely volunteered. The weakness was not that we had no rules. It was that our rules assumed anyone using those small doors belonged there. Dana displayed an access history from the old vendor portal. The account registered to Susan had not remained continuously active. It had been reactivated through a password reset 18 months before the wedding. The reset link had gone to an email address Susan still controlled. After that, the account accessed contact lists, letter templates, historical vendor agreements, and distribution request forms. It could not move money from Second Table's bank accounts. It could not alter payroll or approve major warehouse releases. But it could create enough official-looking documentation to persuade people outside the organization. Susan had not needed complete control. She only needed the appearance of authority. The access pattern matched the events connected to Haley. Logins appeared before the bridal shower, the holiday event, the community brunch, and the wedding. A second set of files showed communication between Haley and several vendors. She approved menus, discussed social media placement, negotiated how often Second Table's name would appear, and asked whether donated items could be counted as charitable contributions for publicity purposes. Susan handled the paperwork. Haley handled the performance. They had divided the work according to their strengths. My mother knew how institutions sounded. My sister knew how generosity looked on camera. Neither of them expected anyone to compare the image with the records. Dana explained that the evidence still required outside verification. Vendors needed to authenticate emails. Device information had to be reviewed. Banking records had to be obtained through appropriate legal channels. She spoke carefully because the investigation was no longer limited to one missing shipment. The board had to consider whether the matter should be referred to law enforcement, insurers, state charity regulators, or all three. Before that decision, the board needed to examine my role. The governance review took place 2 days later. I entered the second table conference room through a side door to avoid reporters waiting near the main entrance. Haley's wedding video had continued circulating, and several local outlets had connected my name to the inquiry. Our board members sat around the long table. Marisol occupied the chair at the far end. Dana joined remotely, because her investigation had to remain separate from the board's employment decisions. I had attended hundreds of meetings in that room. I had presented expansion plans, emergency budgets, and disaster response strategies. I had asked the board to trust my judgment when Second Table entered new cities or accepted difficult partnerships. That morning, I was not asking for trust. I was answering for what I had failed to verify. Marisol began with the account assigned to Susan. Did you request that her access be revoked? Yes. Did you receive confirmation? I received confirmation that the primary volunteer account had been closed. Did you verify linked portals and recovery addresses? No. Why not? I could have said the organization was smaller then. I could have said the system was fragmented. I could have said the staff member responsible for offboarding had left several months later. All of those things were true. None changed my responsibility. I believed the request had been completed, I said. I did not test the remaining access or require a secondary confirmation. One board member leaned forward. Did your relationship with Susan affect that decision? Yes. How? I treated her as a former volunteer I trusted instead of as a user whose access required the same verification as everyone else. The answer settled heavily in the room. My blind spot had not come from love, in the sentimental sense. Susan and I had not been close for years. It came from familiarity. I knew she exaggerated, manipulated, and protected Haley at my expense. I did not believe she would impersonate the organization and divert food. I had drawn the boundary at what I thought she was capable of. She had stepped beyond it without warning me. Marisol asked whether I had ever authorized Haley to use Second Table's name. No. Did you approve any of the events under review? No. Did you receive money or personal benefit from them? No. Did you interfere with the investigation after discovering the tray? No. Dana confirmed that I had reported the matter immediately, preserved the initial evidence, disclosed the family relationships, and stopped accessing the system when instructed. That protected me from accusations of a cover-up. It did not erase the governance failure. The board recessed for nearly an hour. I waited alone in my office. The walls held photographs from Second Table's first decade. Volunteers unloading produce after a winter storm. A supermarket manager handing me the keys to our first refrigerated van. Pantry workers standing beside rows of boxes during the worst months of the pandemic. My name appeared on awards I had stopped noticing years earlier. None of those photographs could answer the question facing the board. Could I continue leading an organization while an investigation examined a weakness tied directly to my family and my oversight? My phone vibrated on the desk. Haley had posted again. This time, she said I had fabricated a financial scandal because Lucas had chosen her over me. The accusation was so absurd that I almost dismissed it. Then I saw the comments. Some people believed her. Others asked whether I had pressured Second Table employees to investigate my mother. A former brand partner announced that it was pausing work with Haley until the matter was clarified. Haley replied that powerful women always destroyed anyone who challenged them. I turned the phone off. She was still trying to make the story about sibling jealousy because the truth was too specific to survive emotion. $200,000 in diverted value could be audited. A copied signature could be compared. A truck could be seen leaving a loading dock. Jealousy could mean anything, which was why she needed it. Marisol entered my office just before 4. She closed the door but remained standing. The board found no evidence that you participated in or knowingly permitted the conduct under investigation. I waited. However, the board also found that your failure to verify the full removal of Susan's access created a preventable vulnerability. I agree. We are expanding the governance review to include all legacy accounts, vendor portals, recovery addresses, and family-related disclosures. That should happen. She watched me carefully. Until we know how deep this goes, you are stepping away from daily operations. The words landed harder than I expected. I had prepared myself for criticism, outside supervision, and mandatory changes. I had not prepared for the possibility that I would leave the building without the authority to run the organization I founded. For how long, I asked? Until the independent review reaches a point where the board can assess your return without compromising the investigation. Am I suspended? No. You will retain your title for now, but the interim executive team will control operations. You cannot direct staff, contact witnesses, access investigative records, or approve vendor decisions. I looked through the glass wall toward the open office. People moved between desks carrying folders and coffee cups. A delivery coordinator pointed at a regional map, while another employee entered figures into a spreadsheet. The organization continued without waiting for me. That hurt my pride. It also proved we had built something larger than one person. I will cooperate, I said. Marisol nodded. I know this is difficult. It is necessary. That does not make it painless. I began gathering the few personal items I kept in the office. A framed photograph of our first van, a notebook filled with handwritten reminders, the ceramic mug Lucas had received during onboarding, identical to the one given to every regional director. I left my office keys on the desk. When I reached the lobby, the receptionist looked up as though she wanted to ask whether I would return the following morning. I did not give her a promise I could not make. Outside, the reporters called my name, but I kept walking. 3 weeks earlier, my family had tried to place me beneath everyone else at a wedding table. Now their actions had removed me from the head of my own organization. The difference was that the board had not acted out of cruelty. They had acted because Second Table needed rules stronger than my reputation. For the first time since I found the blue label, I understood the full cost of what Susan and Haley had done. They had not merely stolen food, services, and money. They had used my trust to open a door inside the organization. Until the board knew how many times they had walked through it, I would remain on the other side. My mother came to my hotel 4 days after I stepped away from Second Table. She did not call first. The front desk phoned my room shortly after 8 in the morning and said a woman claiming to be my mother was demanding to see me. Susan had already told the receptionist that I was under emotional strain and might refuse contact because I was ashamed. Even then, she was preparing the explanation before I could speak. I asked security to send her to the seating area beside the lobby rather than give her my room number. When I came downstairs, Susan was sitting beneath a framed photograph of the Cincinnati skyline. She wore a beige coat, pearl earrings, and the expression she used whenever she wanted strangers to see a concerned mother instead of an angry one. A paper shopping bag rested beside her feet. I brought breakfast, she said. I already ate. You have always refused things just to make a point. I sat across from her but did not remove my coat. Susan opened the bag and placed a container of pastries between us. The gesture was almost convincing. Anyone walking past would have seen a mother trying to feed her daughter after a family disagreement. I saw the woman who had placed stolen food in front of me and called it scraps. What do you want? I asked. I want you to stop this before it goes any further. The board hired an independent investigator. I am no longer directing the process. You founded the organization. Do not pretend you have no influence. I am not pretending. I disclosed the conflict and stepped away. She looked toward the reception desk before leaning closer. You have made your point. Haley lost sponsors. Lucas moved out. People at church are asking questions. How much more punishment do you need? This is not punishment I designed. You reported your own sister. I reported a shipment discrepancy. You knew what would happen. No, I knew food marked for a pantry was sitting at a wedding. Susan pressed her lips together. It was excess food. North River received half its shipment. They still received something. The ease with which she said it disturbed me more than anger would have. For Susan, abundance had always been relative. If someone else had less, but still had something, she believed no real harm had occurred. That logic allowed her to take from Claire because Claire had a career, excuse Haley because Haley was struggling, and dismiss hungry families because they had received some boxes instead of none. The pantry closed early, I said. Families were turned away. They could have returned another day. Food insecurity does not pause until another day. Her expression hardened. You care more about strangers than your own family. I care about what belongs to them. You have warehouses full of food, Claire. Haley had one wedding. The food did not belong to me. You run the organization. That does not make its property mine. Susan gave a short, disbelieving laugh. You built all of that, and now you are letting lawyers tell you what you can do with it. That is exactly why organizations have boards, policies, and outside review. No founder should be able to treat donated resources as personal property. My mother sat back as though I had become unreasonable. She had never understood the difference between access and ownership. If I had something within reach, she believed I could give it to Haley. If I refused, the refusal became evidence that I was selfish. You could have helped your sister, she said. She was drowning in debt. She did not ask me for help. She knew you would judge her. I refused to pay for the wedding. That did not authorize her to impersonate Second Table. Susan looked away. For the first time, she seemed less rehearsed. She needed that wedding to work. What does that mean? Her business was slipping. Companies were not renewing contracts. She needed better content, stronger partnerships, something people would notice. So you helped her present the wedding as a charity event. I helped her contact people, using an account you were no longer authorized to use. It was still active. That does not mean you had permission. You never told me I could not use it. I requested that your access be closed 4 years ago. You never said it to my face. The answer revealed more than she intended. Susan did not deny accessing the account. She argued that the boundary was invalid because I had relied on a formal process instead of confronting her personally. I kept my voice even. Did you reset the password? Her eyes narrowed. I am not discussing technical details with you. Then why are you here? To keep this inside the family. It stopped being only a family matter when outside vendors were deceived and food was diverted. You can reimburse them. With whose money? Susan hesitated. Yours if necessary. There it was. Even after everything, her solution required me to absorb the loss, protect Haley, preserve Susan's reputation, and let everyone else believe the system had corrected itself. If I paid the money back and concealed the cause, I would be participating in the cover-up. That is not a cover-up. It is a mother asking one daughter to protect another. You are asking me to protect the people who caused the harm instead of the people who suffered it. I am asking you to save your family. No, you are asking me to save your story about our family. Her face changed. For years, Susan had told everyone that Haley was warm, generous, and sensitive, while I was ambitious, cold, and difficult. Every act of favoritism depended on those roles remaining fixed. If Haley had deliberately used a charity to fund her wedding, Susan's story collapsed. If Susan had helped her, the collapse included the image of herself as a devoted mother. You always resented her, Susan said. I resented being expected to clean up after her. She needed more support than you did. She received more support because you decided she needed it. Then you used the support as proof that she deserved it. Susan stood and reached for the pastry bag. You sound just like your father. My father believed consequences existed even when they were inconvenient. He abandoned this family. He left our marriage. He did not teach you to forge letters. The lobby seemed quieter after I said it. Susan stared at me, then picked up her handbag. You will regret this when your sister goes to prison. No charges have been filed. You know where this is going. I know the evidence will be reviewed. She stepped closer. You could still tell them it was a misunderstanding. I will tell them what happened. You are destroying her life over food that would have been thrown away. I looked at the untouched pastries between us. You still think the value of something depends on whether you wanted it. She left without answering. That afternoon, Haley called from an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered because Dana had instructed me to preserve all relevant communications. Haley began crying before I spoke. Lucas left me. I heard he moved out. He says he cannot trust me. That is between you and Lucas. You did this. I did not create the sponsorship letter. You humiliated me in front of him. You told him I was someone else. I was trying to protect our relationship. From what? From you judging everything. I walked to the window of my hotel room. Traffic moved below in slow lines beneath the afternoon rain. Did you know the food was assigned to North River? Haley stopped crying. You were not supposed to question me without my lawyer. I asked one question. You can refuse to answer. You have already decided I am guilty. I have decided not to hide what I found. You could have handled this quietly. The board is handling it. You are the board. No, I am one executive accountable to it. She laughed bitterly. You love pretending you are noble. I am not pretending I handled everything perfectly. Then admit this is your fault. I admitted I failed to verify that an old account had been fully closed. That account would not have mattered if you had helped us. Helping you would not have made false documents legitimate. Her breathing changed. The crying disappeared from her voice. If you keep pushing this, I will tell everyone you threatened Lucas's job. I did not. I have video. You have a video of me preserving a tray and leaving. I have enough to make people question you. That was the first honest thing she had said. Haley did not need to prove I had done something wrong. She only needed enough confusion to make every finding look like retaliation. Was that why you recorded me? I asked. I recorded my wedding. The camera was facing my chair. You always think everything is about you. Then you will have no problem preserving the full recording. She did not answer. I continued. Do not delatate. You cannot order me around. I am not ordering you. I am telling you the file may be relevant. You want to ruin me because Lucas works for you. Lucas's employment is no longer under my control. He says he reported everything to compliance. That was the correct decision. You turned my husband against me. No. He learned you used his signature. I did not forge anything. Then the investigation will show that. Her voice sharpened. You think you are untouchable because you built that organization, but you have already been removed. The words struck where she intended. I had spent every morning resisting the instinct to call my staff, review delivery numbers, or ask what decisions the interim team had made. Being excluded from daily operations felt like losing a language I had spoken for 15 years. Haley knew that. She also mistook accountability for defeat. I stepped away because the rules apply to me, I said. That is the difference between us. She disconnected. I saved the call record and immediately sent Dana a written summary. I did not characterize Haley's tone. I quoted the statements I remembered and identified the numbers she had used. The following morning, Lucas participated in another compliance interview. I was not present. Dana later provided only the information necessary for my employment-related disclosure. Lucas had moved into a hotel and retained a family attorney. He had surrendered copies of his communications through counsel and signed consent forms allowing investigators to examine specific work records. He had not asked the board to protect his position. He had asked them to determine whether he had violated policy by failing to recognize the false letter earlier. That mattered. Lucas had been deceived, but he was not demanding that being deceived excuse every mistake. He understood that trust did not remove professional responsibility. Marisol transferred his reporting line to another executive and prohibited private communication between us about the investigation. I accepted the restriction. 2 days later, Dana asked me to meet at her office. A thick binder rested on the conference table. It contained vendor interviews, access histories, copies of false letters, warehouse footage summaries, and preliminary financial tracing. She did not ask me to read it. The evidence now exceeds the scope of an internal compliance matter, she said. I had expected the sentence, but hearing it made the next stage real. What happens now? Second table has reporting obligations to its insurer, and potential James Tapple James Dana Jamestess.com. Second table has referral to the appropriate investigative authorities. Does the board have a choice? It has discretion about how to structure the referral, but concealing suspected fraud would create additional legal and ethical exposure. So this cannot be settled by repayment. Repayment may reduce loss. It does not erase false documents, diverted property, or intentional deception. I looked at the binder. Susan had come to my hotel because she believed I could still stop the process. Haley had called because she believed public pressure could frighten me into trying. Neither understood that the evidence had already moved beyond our family. Dana slid a declaration toward me. It summarized my initial discovery. My relationship to the individuals involved. Susan's former volunteer access. the steps I took to preserve the tray, and my failure to verify the closure of every linked account. The last detail was unfavorable to me. It remained in the document because it was true. You should review this with your personal attorney before signing, Dana said. I will. You are not required to minimize your own exposure to make the case stronger. I know. And you are not required to accept responsibility for choices other people made. I read the declaration twice with counsel later that day. We corrected one date and clarified that I had received confirmation about the primary account, though not the linked portal. We did not remove the failure. I signed the final version the next morning. My signature did not accuse Susan or Haley of a crime. It confirmed the facts I knew and the weakness I had failed to catch. That was enough. By the end of the week, Dana informed me that the referral package had been delivered. Once it left her office, the investigation no longer belonged to Second Table, the board, or me. My mother and sister would not be dealing with a daughter they could guilt or a sister they could provoke. They would be dealing with the state. The investigation had been outside Second Table's control for nearly 3 weeks when Dana asked me to return to her office. She did not tell me why over the phone. She only said the investigators had recovered material that directly concerned the confrontation at Haley's wedding. By then, I had learned not to fill silence with theories. I arrived 10 minutes early and waited in the same conference room where I had signed my declaration. The thick binder from our previous meeting was gone. In its place sat a closed laptop, a yellow legal pad, and a small speaker. Dana entered with an attorney representing Second Table's board. Neither woman offered coffee or casual conversation. This meeting is limited to information you are entitled to receive as a witness and affected executive, Dana said. You will not be given unrestricted access to Haley's device or personal accounts. I understand. The material was preserved through the proper legal process. It was not obtained by Lucas, by Second Table staff, or by you. That distinction mattered. Haley had accused me publicly of using my position to search her private life. If the evidence had passed through my hands improperly, even accurate information could have been weakened. Dana opened the laptop. Before we begin, I need to ask whether Lucas ever told you that Haley had been describing you to him before the wedding. He said she told him I was estranged from the family and used another name. Did he mention anything about your behavior? Only that she had described me as difficult. Dana turned the screen toward me. The first material did not come from Haley's phone. It came from messages Lucas had preserved and provided through his attorney. For months before the wedding, Haley had been sending him stories about me. In one message, she claimed I had ruined a family Thanksgiving by screaming at Susan over a seating arrangement. I remembered that Thanksgiving. Susan had invited Haley's friends, filled every bedroom, then informed me I would be sleeping on the living room sofa despite having paid for most of the groceries. I booked a hotel and left before dinner. I had not screamed. In another message, Haley said I once threatened to destroy her career because she borrowed a dress. The actual argument had been about her taking my company credit card from my purse and using it for a shopping trip. Again, I had not threatened her career. I had canceled the card. The messages followed the same pattern. Haley removed the action that caused the conflict and preserved only my boundary afterward. To Lucas, I became a woman who overreacted without cause. I read several messages before pushing the laptop slightly away. How much of this did he believe? Lucas told investigators he believed there was probably exaggeration on both sides, Dana said. He also admitted that Haley's descriptions influenced expectations before the wedding. That answer was more honest than flattering. Lucas had not known me personally. He had accepted enough of Haley's version to avoid asking questions. I did not need him to pretend otherwise now. Dana opened a transcript from his interview. Lucas described how Haley reacted whenever he mentioned my work. She changed the subject, mocked nonprofit executives, or suggested I was the kind of leader who treated employees like servants. He also admitted something that explained why the scene at the table had shocked him so deeply. During one of our work meetings, I had refused a hotel upgrade because the cost could not be justified under travel policy. Lucas had told Haley afterward that his boss was stricter with herself than with anyone else. Haley replied that people like me performed humility when others were watching. She had prepared an explanation for every contradiction. If I acted generously, it was manipulation. If I enforced a rule, it was cruelty. If I stayed silent, it was arrogance. Nothing I did could challenge the story because the story changed to absorb it. Dana closed Lucas's interview. The next material came from the recording made at the reception. I looked toward the small speaker. The video Haley posted? The full file. I remembered the phone resting against the vase beside her chair. The camera had faced my place setting. Haley wanted my reaction in the center of the frame. What did she preserve? I asked. More than she intended? Dana explained that Haley had started recording before I reached the table. She had been adjusting the angle and testing whether my chair remained visible when guests moved behind it. The phone sat less than 3 feet from where she and Susan were standing. Their voices were not studio quality, but they were clear enough to distinguish after investigators compared them with other verified recordings. The file had automatically synchronized to cloud storage before Haley posted the shortened clip. Even after the original was later removed from the phone, the earlier version remained preserved in the account history. Dana did not say who deleted it or when. That question was still being examined. She pressed a key. At first, I heard wedding music, silverware, and chairs moving across the floor. Then Haley's voice came through the speaker. Move it closer. I want her face when she sees the tray. Susan answered from nearby. Do not make it obvious. She will be too busy staring at the food. There was a brief scraping sound as the phone shifted against the vase. Haley spoke again. She'll either eat it and look pathetic, or explode and prove everything I told Lucas. My mother laughed softly. If she starts shouting, let her finish. Do not interrupt her too soon. What if she notices the label? She won't. Claire never looks at anything once she decides she's offended. The recording continued. Haley asked whether the caterer had removed the other marked containers from the family table. Susan said they had been moved into the service area. Then my mother added the sentence that changed the meaning of the entire confrontation. If she starts asking questions later, nobody will believe her. They'll think she is trying to punish you for the wedding. Dana stopped the audio. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the ventilation system. I kept both hands flat on the table. For most of my life, Susan and Haley had told me that my reactions were the problem. They provoked, excluded, took, or lied, then waited for me to object. Once I did, the conversation shifted from their actions to my tone. At the wedding, they had turned that family pattern into a deliberate strategy. The cold tray was not simply an insult. They had placed it there to manufacture a future defense. If I became angry, they would show the recording to Lucas and anyone else who questioned them. If I later discovered the diverted shipment, they would say I had invented the accusation after being humiliated. They had tried to create the evidence before I knew there was a case. Dana gave me several moments before speaking. Do you need a break? No. My voice sounded controlled because I had spent years learning how to remain understandable while angry. That did not mean I felt nothing. What happened after that section? I asked. The recording captured your arrival, the statements at the table, Lucas recognizing you, and your request to preserve the tray. Did I raise my voice? Not materially. Did I threaten anyone? No. Did I say I would fire Lucas or destroy Haley? No. The answers did not surprise me. They still mattered. Haley had created a recording to prove I was unstable. Instead, the complete file showed her anticipating a reaction that never came. Her shortened public video removed the provocation. The full version restored it. Dana played another section. Haley's phone captured Susan telling me the food came from the staff meal. It captured Haley saying the tray was only leftovers. It also captured their conflicting answers when Lucas asked where the second table food had come from. Then it captured my instructions to him. Do not delete anything, do not forward anything to me. Contact compliance. The same words Haley described online as a threat were evidence that I had immediately separated myself from the investigation. Dana stopped the recording again. The file supports your account of the reception, she said. More importantly, it may support knowledge and intent. Because they discussed the label? Because they anticipated that you might discover something and planned to discredit you before you could report it. I looked at the dark laptop screen. Until then, Susan and Haley could still argue that the wedding shipment resulted from carelessness, misunderstood paperwork, or poor judgment. The recording made those explanations harder. They knew the food carried identifying marks. They knew I might recognize them. They understood that questions could follow. Their solution was not to correct the shipment. It was to damage the credibility of the person most likely to notice. After the meeting, I found Lucas waiting in a separate office with his attorney. Dana had arranged brief, supervised contact because he wanted to address information from his interview that concerned me personally. He stood when I entered. "I owe you an apology," he said. His attorney remained in the room, and Dana stayed near the door. "You owe the investigators a complete account," I replied. "I gave them one." "Then keep doing that." Lucas looked tired. His wedding ring was gone, though the pale line remained on his finger. "I let Haley tell me who you were before I knew you." "Yes." "I should have questioned it." "Yes." He appeared surprised that I did not soften the answer. I was not interested in punishing him, but I would not erase his responsibility to make him feel better. "Being deceived does not make you guilty of what she did," I said. "It also does not mean you learned nothing from choosing the easier version of someone you had never met." He nodded. "I understand. Then tell the truth even when it makes you look naive." "I will." That was all I needed from him. I did not ask about his marriage, his hotel, or whether he still loved Haley. Those questions belonged to his private life and his attorney. When I returned to my hotel, I opened the written statement I had prepared after the wedding. Every fact remained accurate. I had not known Haley's phone had already recorded her plan. I had not needed that knowledge to make the correct decision. I had seen the label, protected the tray, disclosed my conflict, and stepped away. For years, I believed my greatest weakness was waiting too long before speaking. The recording showed something more complicated. Susan and Haley depended on that delay. They expected me to endure the first insult, then react only after the pressure became unbearable. By then, they could point to my anger instead of their conduct. At the wedding, I had broken the pattern before they could complete it. I left. I documented what I saw. I called the board. I refused to investigate my own family. Their trap failed because I did not give them the performance they had prepared to use against me. Dana called again that evening. "The recording has been added to the referral package," she said. "Investigators will determine its legal significance." "What is your assessment?" She paused before answering. "It changes the context. This is no longer only evidence that resources were diverted. It is evidence that the people involved may have anticipated discovery and planned to undermine the person who could report it. The cold tray had shown where the food went. The invoices had shown who received the money. The recording showed why my mother and sister had tried so hard to make me look unstable before I asked a single question. They had not been protecting a wedding. They had been preparing their cover story. Nearly 6 months after Haley's wedding, the charges were finally filed. By then, investigators had spent weeks interviewing vendors, confirming bank transfers, examining account access records, and comparing the false documents with the originals stored by Second Table. There was no dramatic raid. No officers appeared at Susan's house before sunrise. No one dragged Haley from a restaurant while cameras followed. Their attorneys were notified first. Arrangements were made for both women to surrender at the courthouse on a Monday morning. I learned about it from Dana the Friday before. "The prosecutor has authorized charges against Haley and Susan," she said. "Their attorneys have agreed to bring them in voluntarily." "What are they being charged with?" Dana gave me only the information that had already become part of the public record. The allegations included a coordinated scheme to obtain donated goods and services through false representations, the use of Lucas's copied signature, the diversion and resale of food, and the falsification of records connected to charitable distributions. The exact wording mattered to the lawyers. What mattered to me was simpler. For nearly 6 months, Susan and Haley had called the investigation a misunderstanding, a family dispute, and an act of revenge. Now their conduct had an official name. Dana warned me that the filing of charges was not a conviction. The state still had to prove its case, and both women remained entitled to defend themselves. "I understand. You should also expect renewed media attention." "I won't comment. That is the correct approach." I had already spent months refusing invitations from local stations, podcasts, and newspapers. Some wanted to discuss nonprofit oversight. Others wanted the wedding footage. One producer offered to let me tell my side during a live interview opposite Haley. I declined. The evidence did not need a debate stage. On Monday morning, Haley arrived at the courthouse wearing a dark blue dress and large sunglasses. Photographers captured her stepping from a black vehicle while her attorney held the door. She had styled herself carefully. Her hair was smooth, her makeup was understated, and her expression suggested that she had been summoned to answer for someone else's cruelty. Susan arrived 10 minutes later with a different attorney. That detail attracted almost as much attention as the charges. Until then, they had presented themselves as a united family under attack. Separate lawyers suggested that their interests were no longer identical. I did not attend the surrender. I watched a short news report from my apartment because the filings concerned the organization I still hoped to lead. The reporter said both women had been processed, appeared before a judge, entered initial pleas, and were released under conditions while the case continued. There were no handcuffs displayed for the cameras. There did not need to be. Haley's face as she left the courthouse showed that the performance she had planned was already slipping. A reporter called out, asking whether she had used food intended for struggling families to pay for her wedding. Haley turned toward her attorney instead of answering. Susan looked directly into the cameras. "My daughter is innocent," she said. She did not specify which daughter. That afternoon, my Aunt Beverly called. She had ignored every report, audit summary, and public filing for months. Now that Susan had appeared outside a courthouse, Beverly wanted to discuss forgiveness. "This has gone too far," she said. "I'm not directing the prosecution. You started it. I reported a shipment discrepancy. You knew they would investigate." "Yes. And you kept cooperating." "Yes." Her frustration increased with each answer. Haley could go to prison over a wedding. The allegations cover 18 months. She is your sister. That does not change the records. You always cared more about being right than keeping the family together. I walked to my kitchen and placed the phone on the counter. "Have you read the independent audit? I do not need to read 200 pages to know Susan would never steal from hungry people. The public report is 23 pages. Beverly was silent. I sent her the link. "I am not asking you to take my word for anything," I said. "Read what the vendors, warehouse records, invoices, and financial documents show. You cannot replace family with paperwork. Paperwork is how people prove what happened when family members lie." She ended the call shortly afterward. That evening, she sent me one message. "I hope being right keeps you warm." I did not reply. For most of my life, relatives like Beverly had treated silence as neutrality. If they did not examine what Susan and Haley did, they could continue describing the conflict as two sisters who needed to apologize to each other. The audit threatened that comfort. It replaced vague family tension with dates, quantities, transfers, and names. A week after the courthouse appearances, Dana called me into another supervised meeting. "The defense positions are beginning to separate," she said. I had expected that from the moment Susan and Haley arrived with different attorneys. "How?" "Haley's counsel is suggesting she relied on Susan's representations that the documents and food transfers were authorized." He sat back. Haley approved the menus. "Yes." "She directed the unused food to the restaurant." "Yes." "The payment went to her company." "Yes." "All of that is documented." "It is." "Then how can she claim she did not know?" Her attorney does not need the explanation to be complete at this stage. He needs it to create distance between her actions and the creation of the false authority. Haley was not denying that she benefited. She was trying to argue that Susan made the benefits appear legitimate. Dana explained that Haley had given investigators a more detailed account through counsel. According to that version, Susan handled every interaction with Second Table's systems. Haley claimed she believed her mother still possessed informal authority from the organization's early years. She described herself as careless, entitled, and financially desperate, but not as the architect of the fraud. That distinction could affect sentencing if the case ended in a plea. "How did Susan respond?" I asked. "Poorly." Susan's attorney denied that his client controlled the operation. He said Susan was an older mother pressured by a financially unstable daughter who understood social media, branding, and business accounts better than she did. Each woman was now describing herself as the other's tool. The golden child and the mother who had protected her for 31 years were no longer defending the family. They were negotiating who would carry more of its guilt. The evidence limited how far either story could go. Haley's messages showed her choosing vendors, approving promotional language, and directing the sale to the restaurant. Bank records showed that she used the money for wedding expenses and personal debt. Susan's account history showed password resets, document access, and repeated use before each false event. Her emails contained instructions about loading times, donation acknowledgements, and how vendors should describe the transactions. The recording from the wedding placed them together. Haley planned the reaction she wanted from me. Susan explained how that reaction could discredit me later. Neither woman could make the other responsible for every step because the scheme had required both of them. Dana showed me a timeline prepared for the board. It began with the password reset 18 months before the wedding. It continued through the bridal shower, the holiday event, the community brunch, and the diverted North River shipment. Beside each event were 2 columns. Susan handled access, paperwork, and vendor trust. Haley handled presentation, money, and public image. The pattern was so consistent that it looked less like chaos than a business model. "Will this go to trial?" I asked. "That depends on the prosecutor, the defense attorneys, and the plea discussions. Have offers been made?" "Preliminary ones." The state's proposed resolution required Haley to admit her role in the fraud, accept a period of incarceration, repay losses, and agree to restrictions on future fundraising activity. Susan's proposed agreement recognized her supporting role, but still required a guilty plea, restitution, home confinement, or another restrictive sentence, and several years of supervision. Neither offer allowed them to describe the conduct as an innocent family misunderstanding. That was apparently the part Susan resisted most. She wanted the benefits of cooperation without admitting that she had knowingly used Second Table's name and systems. She says Haley manipulated her. Dana told me. Does she deny resetting the account? No. Does she deny writing the letters? She says she believed Claire would approve if asked. Dana used my name because she was repeating the legal position. I almost admired the structure of Susan's excuse. She had not asked because she knew I would refuse. Then she used the possibility that I might have agreed as proof that she had done nothing wrong. Has she explained why she tried to discredit me? I asked. Her attorney says the wedding conversation reflected family frustration, not consciousness of guilt. She discussed the label. Yes. She said nobody would believe me if I asked questions. Yes. Then she understood there was something to hide. That will be part of the state's argument. Dana closed the timeline. The prosecutor may ask you for a victim impact statement later. Not now. I'll be ready. You should focus on the effect on Second Table and the affected community. Do not use it to argue sentencing recommendations unless counsel advises otherwise. I don't want to select their punishment. That was true. I wanted the court to see the evidence and impose consequences that matched it. I did not need to become the person deciding how many months Haley lost or how restricted Susan's life became. My role was to tell the truth without shrinking it. 2 weeks later, Haley accepted the plea agreement in principle. Her attorney notified the prosecutor that she would admit to the central conduct rather than take the full case to trial. The agreement still required court approval and a formal hearing. Lucas learned the news through his attorney. He did not contact me. Haley issued no public apology. Instead, HG Social posted a statement saying she had chosen a resolution to protect her mental health and end the financial burden of litigation. The statement did not mention the pantry. It did not mention the copied signature. It did not mention the vendors or the money. Even while preparing to plead guilty, Haley was still trying to control the caption. Susan refused to join her. Her attorney continued arguing that she had been manipulated by a demanding daughter and misunderstood the authority connected to her old volunteer access. Dana called me after receiving the latest update. Haley is moving forward with the agreement, she said. Susan is not. What does Susan want? To be treated as a mother who made poor decisions under pressure, not as a knowing participant. I thought of the recording from the wedding. Do not interrupt her too soon. Nobody will believe her. Those were not the words of a confused volunteer following instructions. They were the words of a woman who understood exactly how to hide behind the family she claimed to protect. Haley had accepted that the state could prove its case. Susan still believed motherhood could excuse hers. The final audit arrived 8 months after Haley's wedding. By then, the preliminary number had become precise enough to attach names, dates, and destinations to almost every loss. The total was $193,600. That figure included diverted food, donated services, false sponsorship benefits, resale proceeds, vendor expenses, and the cost of reconstructing records across 18 months. Dana warned me not to reduce the case to one total. Large numbers become abstract, she said. The court will understand the amount. Your statement should explain what the amount did. I knew what she meant. $193,600 sounded like a financial problem. A locked pantry door sounded like a consequence. The manager of North River Community Pantry agreed to provide a statement for the sentencing record. Her name was Carolyn Webb. I had met her twice before the investigation, but I had not spoken to her since the missing shipment was discovered. Our contact remained supervised until the prosecution completed its witness review. When Dana finally allowed us to meet, Carolyn did not accuse me. That made the conversation harder. We sat in a small conference room at the pantry beneath fluorescent lights. Shelves of canned beans, rice, cereal, and boxed pasta were visible through the open doorway. Carolyn placed a copy of the delivery sheet between us. We planned for 72 family boxes that day, she said. We received 36. How long did they last? Until a little after 4. The pantry normally remained open until 6. Carolyn explained that the line had already formed before they realized the second half of the shipment would not arrive. Volunteers reduced portions at first, hoping to stretch what remained. Then the shelves emptied. They taped a printed notice to the front door. No more boxes today. Several people were still waiting outside. One woman had taken 2 buses after finishing a cleaning shift. An older man had come for food that would last until his next Social Security payment. A father arrived with his teenage daughter and asked whether they could receive only bread and milk. There was nothing left to give them. Carolyn did not dramatize those details. She recited them the way people describe decisions they wish they had never been forced to make. We referred everyone to 2 other locations, she said, but one had already closed, and the other was nearly 8 miles away. Did they all receive food later? I do not know. That answer stayed with me. Second table existed to prevent people from being sent from one locked door to another. Susan and Haley had treated half a shipment as excess, because they never had to follow the people who left without it. I am sorry, I said. Carolyn looked at me carefully. You reported it. I also failed to verify that an old account was fully disabled. Yes. She did not rescue me from the truth. Then she added, both things can be true. I had spent much of my life around people who treated responsibility as a contest. If I admitted one failure, Susan used it to erase everyone else's actions. If Haley suffered a consequence, the family searched for someone who could absorb the blame on her behalf. Carolyn did not do that. She allowed my mistake and their choices to exist at the same time. Before I left, she showed me the spot on the glass door where the notice had been taped. A pale rectangle remained, where the adhesive had blocked dust and fingerprints. The paper was gone. Its outline was still there. That evening, I began drafting my victim impact statement. My first version was angry. I wrote about the cold chicken, the disposable tray, Haley's phone, and the way Susan had watched me as if my humiliation were part of the entertainment. I described being called pathetic in front of 200 guests. I wrote that my mother and sister had spent years turning every boundary into proof that I was cruel. All of it was true. None of it explained the full harm. I deleted 3 pages. The second draft focused on second table. I wrote about warehouse employees who signed release forms believing the documents were legitimate. I wrote about vendors who donated time and services because they trusted our name. I wrote about board members and staff who had to question whether the organization's controls were strong enough to deserve public confidence. I wrote about the months I spent away from daily operations while other people carried responsibilities I had once considered mine alone. That version was more useful, but it still placed me at the center. I deleted another page. The final statement began with North River's door. I described the notice that went up 2 hours early. I described the people who had already spent time and money reaching the pantry. I did not name them because I did not know their names. That was part of the harm. The people who lost the food remained invisible to the women who used it. Then I addressed my own failure. I wrote, I failed to verify that an old door had been locked. I accept responsibility for that failure and for helping build a system that relied too heavily on familiarity. I stopped typing for several minutes before completing the thought. They are responsible for choosing to walk through that door, using what they found, and creating false records to keep it open. I read the sentence aloud. It did not absolve me. It also did not allow Susan and Haley to hide inside my mistake. That was the balance I had been searching for. A week later, Dana told me the prosecution had completed its review of the account metadata connected to Susan. The explanation was simpler than the technical reports made it sound. The password reset link had been sent to Susan's personal email address. The old vendor portal was accessed from her home internet connection and from a tablet registered to her. Files connected to the false events had been opened, edited, and sent during those sessions. Susan's attorney could still argue about pressure or motive. He could no longer reasonably argue that she did not know the account was being used. There were also emails in which Susan corrected wording in the false sponsorship letters. In one message, she instructed Haley not to describe the wedding as a private reception when speaking with vendors. "Say community fundraiser," Susan wrote. "That gives them a reason to donate." In another, she warned that the North River shipment could not appear on any wedding invoice because Claire reviews distribution records when something looks unusual. Susan had known the food was allocated. She had known I might notice. She had known the paperwork needed to disguise the transfer. Her claim that she was merely a confused mother had reached its limit. 3 days later, she accepted the plea agreement. The final terms were not lenient enough to let her call the outcome a misunderstanding, but they recognized that Haley had received more money and directed more of the public-facing scheme. Susan agreed to admit that she knowingly used outdated credentials, created false documentation, assisted in redirecting donated resources, and helped conceal the source of those resources. In exchange, prosecutors agreed to recommend harance instead of a longer custodial sentence, followed by probation, restitution, and a ban on managing charitable funds. When Dana told me, I felt relief rather than triumph. A trial would have required pantry managers, vendors, employees, and Lucas to repeat the story in public over months. A plea did not erase what Susan had done. It made denial harder. Haley's agreement was already moving toward a formal hearing. She would admit to directing the financial side of the scheme, using donated goods for personal benefit, authorizing the resale, and participating in the use of Lucas's copied signature. Her attorneys had tried to negotiate language that would describe the wedding recording as a family argument unrelated to the fraud. The prosecution refused. The recording remained part of the factual basis because it showed that Haley and Susan anticipated discovery and planned to discredit me. The cold tray would follow them into court, not as an insult, as evidence of intent. Around the same time, Lucas's marriage ended through his attorneys. He did not discuss the details with me. Human Resources informed the board only that the legal process had concluded and that no continuing family relationship created an additional reporting issue. The compliance review found that Lucas had not participated in the fraud. His signature had been copied, and he had preserved his records as soon as instructed. The review also noted that he had failed to question inconsistencies in Haley's stories and had not recognized suspicious references to second table before the wedding. That was poor judgment, not misconduct. The board allowed him to remain employed under a different reporting line. He was required to complete additional compliance training and could not participate in vendor approvals connected to the investigation. Some people inside the organization believed he should have been dismissed simply because his marriage had created the problem. I disagreed. If Second Table punished an employee for being deceived after he had reported honestly and cooperated fully, we would be replacing evidence with appearance. I did not protect Lucas. The process did. That difference mattered to me. 9 days before sentencing, Marisol asked whether I was prepared to read my statement in court. Yes. Have you decided what you want the judge to do? That is not my decision. You may be asked whether you support the plea agreements. I support a resolution that includes admission, restitution, restrictions, and consequences. I am not going to calculate their sentences. Marisol studied me across the table. You sound certain. I am certain about what happened. I do not need to become the punishment to prove it mattered. The night before the hearing, I printed the final statement and placed it inside a plain folder. Susan sent me an email through her attorney that same evening. It contained no apology to the pantry, the vendors, Lucas, or Second Table. She wrote that she hoped I would remember she was still my mother when I stood before the judge. Haley sent nothing. I did not answer Susan's email. I read my statement once more, then turned off the light. The next morning, I entered the courtroom with the folder held against my side. Haley sat beside her attorney at one table. Susan sat at another. My sister looked straight ahead. My mother turned in her seat and found me immediately. For one suspended second, her expression became familiar. It was the same look she had used throughout my childhood whenever Haley crossed a line and consequences approached. It was not an apology. It was a request. She was still waiting for me to save her. Susan held my gaze until the court clerk asked everyone to rise. I did not nod to her, smile, or look away. I simply stood with the folder pressed against my side while the judge entered and took her seat. The courtroom was smaller than the rooms television dramas had taught people to expect. There was no crowded gallery waiting for a spectacle. Most of the seats were occupied by attorneys, second table representatives, several vendors, 2 members of the press, and people connected to the pantry network. Haley sat at the defense table closest to the jury box, though there would be no jury that morning. Her plea agreement had already been accepted. The hearing would determine whether the judge followed the sentencing recommendations. Susan sat at a separate table with her attorney. The physical distance between them was less than 20 feet. Emotionally, they had never been farther apart. The prosecutor began by summarizing the conduct both women had admitted. Haley had used second table's identity to obtain food, services, and sponsorship benefits for private events. She had approved false promotional language, directed the resale of donated food, received the proceeds through HG Social, and participated in the use of Lucas's copied signature. Susan had accessed the old vendor portal, created and distributed false documents, coordinated pickups, and used her history with Second Table to convince vendors that the events were legitimate. The prosecutor did not use words like cruel, selfish, or entitled. She used dates, transactions, quantities, and admissions. That was more powerful. Cruelty could be argued as perspective. A bank transfer could not. Haley's attorney spoke first. He described her as a first-time offender whose business had been failing under intense financial pressure. He said she had become obsessed with preserving a public image that no longer matched her actual income. He emphasized that she had accepted responsibility before trial and agreed to restitution. Then Haley stood to speak. Her voice was quiet and carefully controlled. "I am sorry for the mistakes that were made," she began. "I was under enormous pressure surrounding my wedding and my business. I trusted people I should not have trusted, and I made decisions I regret." The judge looked down at the written plea agreement. "Miss Grant, who made the decision to direct the unused food to the restaurant?" Haley hesitated. "I approved the arrangement. Who controlled HG Social?" "I did." "Who used the money received by that company?" "I did." The judge leaned forward slightly. "The food belonged to whom?" Haley looked toward her attorney. He did not answer for her. "It belonged to Second Table," she said. The judge shook her head. "Second Table was responsible for distributing it. That is not the same as ownership in the ordinary sense. Who was supposed to receive it?" Haley swallowed. "Families using the pantry." The courtroom remained silent. For 8 months, she had described the food as excess, leftovers, donated goods, and wedding support. In that room, she finally had to name the people from whom it had been taken. The judge asked why Haley had recorded the confrontation at the wedding. Haley said she expected a difficult family interaction and wanted proof in case I caused a scene. The prosecutor directed the court to the full recording. The judge did not replay it. She had already reviewed the evidence. "You discussed the identifying label before Miss Bennett reached the table," she said. "You also discussed using her anticipated reaction to discredit any later questions." "That was not merely a family disagreement." Haley lowered her eyes. "No, Your Honor. It was the closest she came to admitting that the humiliation had been planned." Susan's attorney spoke next. "He described my mother as a woman who had spent her life caring for others and became too involved in solving her younger daughter's financial problems. He argued that Susan had not received the largest financial benefit and had acted from misplaced loyalty rather than greed. He asked the judge to consider her age, community involvement, and lack of criminal history." Susan stood behind the table. "I wanted to help my daughter," she said. "I understand now that I went about it the wrong way." The judge studied her. "Did helping your daughter require you to reset access to a system you no longer had authority to use?" Susan glanced at her lawyer. "No, Did helping her require you to create letters that falsely represented private events as charitable fundraisers? No. Did helping her require directing a shipment away from a pantry? Susan's voice became smaller. No. Then the court is not sentencing you for being a supportive mother. It is sentencing you for the choices you made while claiming that role. Susan's face tightened. For years, motherhood had been the final defense she used against every boundary. She believed that wanting something for Haley made the method less important. The judge refused to accept that equation. When my name was called, I carried the folder to the lectern. I had expected to feel the weight of Haley and Susan watching me. Instead, I saw the glass door at North River Pantry. I remembered the clean rectangle where the notice had been taped, and Carolyn's quiet admission that she did not know whether the family sent away had found food elsewhere. I opened my statement. Your Honor, I am not here only as Claire Bennett, the sister and daughter of the defendants. I am here as the founder of an organization whose name was used to take resources from people who had trusted us to deliver them. I described the warehouse workers who followed a transfer order because it looked authentic. I described the vendors who donated food and services because they believed they were supporting community programs. I described employees who spent months rebuilding records while the organization's credibility was questioned. Then I described North River. The pantry expected enough food to remain open until 6. It closed shortly after 4. A sign was placed on the door while people were still waiting. Some had taken buses after work. Others had calculated that those boxes would last until their next paycheck or benefit payment. They were sent away because food assigned to them was being used to support a private wedding. Haley shifted in her chair. I did not look at her. The defendants repeatedly described the food as excess. It was not excess to the people who arrived after it was gone. I paused before addressing my role. I failed to verify that an old door had been locked. I accept responsibility for that failure, and for helping build a system that relied too heavily on familiarity. That failure has been documented, reviewed, and used to improve our controls. Susan looked toward me again. I continued. They are responsible for choosing to walk through that door, using what they found, and creating false records to keep it open. I did not ask for the longest available sentences. I did not ask the judge to show mercy. I asked that restitution recognize the pantry, the vendors, and second table. I asked that neither woman be allowed to manage charitable funds while the court's restrictions remained in effect. Then I closed the folder. The prosecutor asked whether I wished to address the humiliation at the wedding. No, I said. What happened to me at that table explains how the evidence was discovered. It is not the greatest harm in this case. That answer appeared to surprise Haley. She had spent months presenting herself as the victim of a sister seeking revenge for a cruel meal. She needed the case to remain personal because personal pain could be dismissed as resentment. I would not give her that defense. The judge recessed before announcing the sentences. We waited in the hallway. Lucas stood with his attorney near the elevators. He did not approach me. Carolyn from North River sat beside one of second table's board members, reading through a folded copy of her statement. Haley remained in a consultation room. Susan was allowed to speak privately with her attorney near the opposite end of the hall. She looked toward me several times, but she did not come closer. When court resumed, the judge addressed Haley first. She acknowledged the guilty plea and cooperation, while emphasizing that the scheme extended far beyond one wedding. Haley had repeatedly converted charitable trust into private benefits and used public displays of generosity to conceal the conduct. The court sentenced her to 18 months in custody. After release, she would serve a period of supervised release, comply with financial monitoring, and pay restitution jointly with Susan. She was prohibited from controlling charitable accounts, organizing fundraising campaigns, or representing herself as an agent of a nonprofit during the court-ordered restriction period. HG Social would be dissolved as part of the financial settlement. Haley's shoulders dropped. Her attorney whispered something to her, but she did not respond. 18 months was not the maximum punishment the prosecution might have pursued at trial. It was also not the symbolic consequence Haley had expected when she first called the scheme a misunderstanding. The sentence was real. It would remove her from the audience she had spent years building and place her life under rules she could not edit, crop, or caption. The judge then addressed Susan. She said Susan's role was different but not minor. Susan had supplied the institutional credibility that made the scheme possible. Without her access, language, and vendor relationships, Haley's public image would not have been enough. Because of Susan's age, guilty plea, lack of prior convictions, and lower financial benefit, the court approved a sentence centered on home confinement rather than extended incarceration. Susan would serve 12 months of home confinement with electronic monitoring, followed by several years of probation. She would be required to provide financial records, obtain approval for certain transactions, and pay restitution jointly with Haley. The court prohibited her from managing charitable funds, accessing nonprofit systems, or holding positions involving donated resources. Several assets would be sold to satisfy part of the restitution order, including a luxury vehicle purchased during the period of the scheme. Susan closed her eyes when the judge mentioned the vehicle. She had used it for months as evidence that Haley's business was finally succeeding. Now it would help repay the people whose trust had financed that illusion. The judge ended by addressing both women. Charity is not created by using the language of generosity. It is created by honoring the purpose for which people give. You used that language to disguise private benefit. The hearing concluded without applause or shouting. Haley remained beside her attorney while the clerk reviewed the date and conditions of her voluntary surrender. Susan stayed at the other defense table while her electronic monitoring and reporting requirements were explained. I left the courtroom with Marisol and Dana. Near the end of the corridor, Susan called my name. I stopped but did not walk back to her. She approached as far as the court officer allowed. The polish she had worn into the building was gone. She looked older, exhausted, and genuinely afraid. For a moment, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she said, "Are you really going to let them take your sister away?" The question contained every year of our family history. Haley acted. Susan protected her. I was asked to absorb the cost. Even after the plea, the evidence, and the judge's sentence, my mother still treated consequences as something I was doing. "You asked me that every time she hurt someone," I said. "You never asked who she was taking from." Susan stared at me. I did not wait for an answer. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered behind a barrier. I declined every question and entered Marisol's car. The sentences were complete. The restitution orders had been entered. The restrictions would follow Susan and Haley for years. Yet one decision remained unresolved. I had told the court that Second Table's systems had changed. I still did not know whether the board believed I should be the person leading them. As the courthouse disappeared behind us, Marisol said the governance committee would meet the following week. They would decide whether I could return as chief executive officer. My mother and sister had received their consequences. I was still waiting to learn mine. The governance committee met 6 days after sentencing. I arrived at Second Table's headquarters before 8 that morning, but I did not enter through the executive entrance. My temporary access badge no longer opened that door, and I had not asked anyone to make an exception. A security officer met me in the lobby and escorted me upstairs. The building felt familiar without feeling like mine. Employees moved through the halls carrying delivery reports and vendor files. The regional operations screen showed trucks already traveling toward 3 counties. Someone had replaced the plant outside my former office after the old one died. The organization had continued growing while I was gone. That realization no longer felt like an insult. It felt like proof that I had built something capable of surviving my absence. Marisol waited outside the boardroom with Dana and 2 members of the governance committee. She greeted me warmly, but gave no indication of what the board had decided. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. They reviewed the independent investigation, my disclosure history, the legacy access failure, the public damage to Second Table, and the changes implemented during my leave. Dana confirmed that investigators had found no evidence that I knew about the scheme before the wedding. I had received no personal benefit, approved none of the false events, and interfered with no witnesses or records. Then the committee turned to the part that remained mine. I had requested Susan's access removal 4 years earlier, but I had accepted incomplete confirmation. The primary volunteer account was closed while the connected vendor portal and recovery address remained active. No law required me to test every disabled account personally. Leadership required me to build a system in which someone did. The committee chair asked what I would change if I returned. I did not promise perfection. I described a two-person offboarding process for every employee, volunteer, contractor, and board member. One person would request the removal. Another would verify that email accounts, vendor portals, shared folders, recovery addresses, and mobile sessions had all been disabled. Legacy accounts would be reviewed quarterly. Vendor requests involving donated inventory would require an active employee sponsor and a second approval from someone outside the requesting department. No family member of a senior executive could hold informal access, represent second table to vendors, or participate in an event using the organization's name without written disclosure and board-approved oversight. External vendors would receive a verification link tied to an official domain, rather than relying on attached letters or familiar names. We have already implemented most of those changes, the committee chair said. I know. What would your role be if you returned? To make sure they remain normal after the crisis stops feeling urgent. She asked whether I believed my history with Susan had impaired my judgment. Yes. Could it happen again? Not through the same system. That was not my question. I understood what she wanted. My familiarity with someone can still affect my judgment. Returning as chief executive would not remove that risk. It would require me to disclose it earlier and accept independent review before trust becomes an exception. The committee chair made a note. You are asking the board to restore your authority while admitting that your judgment is not infallible. I would be more concerned about a leader who claimed otherwise. Marisol looked down, but I saw the edge of a smile. The board recessed shortly before noon. I waited in a smaller conference room overlooking the loading area. A refrigerated truck reversed toward the dock while two employees guided it with raised hands. For months, I had imagined that returning to second table would restore everything the investigation had taken from me. Sitting there, I understood that nothing should be restored exactly as it had been. The old structure had depended too heavily on trust, flowing upward toward me. The new one had to depend on verification moving in every direction, including toward the founder. Marisol entered alone. The board voted to reinstate you as chief executive officer. I let out a breath I had been holding since the courthouse. The vote was not unanimous, she continued. It should not have been. Your return includes conditions: quarterly governance reporting, an annual independent access audit, continued separation from matters involving Lucas, and board approval for any exception to vendor or family conflict policies. I accept. You will also participate in a public accountability session with major partners. You will discuss the control failure without commenting on the criminal case beyond the public record. I accept that too. Marisol placed a new access badge on the table. You can return Monday. I picked it up but did not put it around my neck. Thank you. This is not forgiveness, Claire. I know. It is a decision based on what the board believes the organization needs. That is what it should be. She sat across from me. For what it is worth, the way you stepped away influenced the vote. So did the reason I had to. Yes. I returned to the office the following Monday. There was no celebration in the lobby. I had asked Marisol not to arrange one. The staff deserved clarity, not a performance about resilience. At the all-hands meeting, I spoke for 12 minutes. I told them the board had found that I did not participate in the fraud. I also told them my failure to verify the complete removal of a family member's access had helped create the vulnerability. I thanked the interim leadership team without describing them as placeholders. They had carried the organization through the most damaging review in its history. Then I explained the new controls. Nobody applauded until I finished answering questions. One employee asked whether senior leadership would truly follow the same access rules as everyone else. Yes, I said. The first executive account reviewed under the new procedure was mine. Another asked whether Second Table planned to hide the incident from future donors. No, the public audit summary, corrective plan, and restitution information will remain available. A warehouse supervisor asked what would happen if the new controls slowed emergency deliveries. We will improve the process, I said. We will not remove verification because urgency makes trust convenient. That was the most important lesson the investigation had taught me. A good purpose did not excuse weak controls. People who claimed noble intentions could still cause deliberate harm. Several months would pass before restitution was complete. Susan and Haley did not possess enough liquid money to repay everything immediately. HG Social was dissolved. Its remaining funds were transferred toward restitution. Haley's luxury purchases, and several business assets were sold. Susan surrendered the vehicle the court had identified and paid through a structured plan monitored during probation. Second Table's insurer covered a portion of the documented loss after the organization met its reporting obligations. The board created a recovery fund that repaid vendors according to verified claims. No vendor was asked to absorb the price of trusting our name. The recovered money assigned to North River did more than replace the missing food. The pantry had been operating with an aging delivery van that broke down several times each month. The board approved a replacement vehicle using restitution funds, insurance recovery, and a restricted donation from a partner who had followed the case. Carolyn asked that the van carry no reference to Haley, Susan, or the scandal. She wanted the community to see food arriving, not the names of the people who had once redirected it. I agreed. The new refrigerated vehicle entered service 4 months after sentencing. I attended the first delivery but did not speak to the press. There were no press invitations. Carolyn stood near the loading area while volunteers unloaded boxes of produce, dairy products, and prepared meals. The driver scanned each section of the shipment separately. 36 boxes became 48, then 60, then 72. The dashboard updated only after Carolyn confirmed the quantity on her own device. Complete no longer meant someone had clicked a box at the warehouse. It meant the receiving pantry had verified what physically arrived. I watched the final confirmation appear on the screen. For the first time since the wedding, that word felt earned. Lucas remained at Second Table, though he never reported directly to me again. The board transferred him permanently to another executive and limited his role in external vendor authorization until he completed the required training period. He accepted those conditions without complaint. We spoke occasionally in group meetings. Our conversations were professional, brief, and free of the false intimacy people expected. Because he had once married my sister, he did not become my ally in a family feud. He became an employee who had made one serious error in judgment, cooperated honestly, and continued doing his work under appropriate supervision. His divorce from Haley remained private. I never asked for details. Haley entered custody on the surrender date approved by the court. Her attorney later filed routine requests related to placement and financial reporting, but none changed the sentence. She wrote to me once. The letter began with an apology. But by the second paragraph, she was explaining how Susan had controlled her, how Lucas had abandoned her, and how I had benefited professionally from the scandal. I did not answer. An apology that required me to deny reality was only another request for protection. Susan began home confinement at the house where she had raised us. Her movements were restricted, her finances monitored, and her internet access subject to the terms approved by the court. She sent birthday cards, holiday messages, and one long email about family healing. I responded only through counsel when necessary. No family dinner took place. No tearful reunion repaired the years before the wedding or the choices that followed it. I did not cut them off to punish them. I ended contact because every relationship they offered still required me to surrender the truth before entering it. Some relatives called that unforgiving. Others stopped calling after reading the audit. Aunt Beverly sent a brief message several months later. I read the report. I did not understand. It was not an apology, but it was the first time she had acknowledged that understanding required effort. I replied with one sentence. Now you do. The blue label from the wedding tray remained sealed inside the investigation archive. Dana asked whether I wanted a copy framed for my office. She was joking, but I declined. The label was not a trophy. It represented food that had failed to reach its destination, a control I had failed to verify, and a scheme my family believed could remain invisible if they made me look unreasonable first. It belonged with the compliance evidence, where future investigators and auditors could see how a small irregularity exposed a much larger pattern. I kept only the photograph of the first North River delivery made under the new verification system. The image showed no faces. It showed stacked boxes inside the pantry, the open doors of the new vehicle, and a handheld scanner displaying the confirmed quantity. That photograph replaced an award on the wall of my office. 14 months after the wedding, Second Table was stronger than it had been before the scandal. Not because the harm helped us. Harm does not become valuable simply because people learn from it. We became stronger because we stopped protecting the weaknesses that allowed it. I lost the belief that good intentions could substitute for oversight. Lucas lost a marriage built on carefully managed lies. Vendors lost trust and had to decide whether we had earned it back. Families lost food on a day when they had planned their lives around receiving it. Those costs were real, even after restitution. Susan once believed that family loyalty meant preventing Haley from facing consequences. Haley believed compassion was an image she could borrow when her own business needed attention. I learned that accountability was not the opposite of love. Sometimes it was the only honest form of it left. My mother thought scraps were good enough for me. What she never understood was that I had stopped measuring my worth by what she put on my plate. I measured it by what I refused to let her take from someone else. When someone uses family loyalty to excuse dishonesty, you do not have to protect them from the consequences of their choices. You can admit your own mistakes, correct weak boundaries, preserve evidence, and still refuse to carry blame that belongs to someone else. Real compassion means protecting the people who were harmed, not preserving the image of those who caused the harm.